The desert wind howls across a lonely stretch of land where the horizon seems endless. For a moment, everything looks still. Until you notice the faint outline of a caravan moving like ghosts through the shimmering heat. Their steps are slow, cautious, almost fearful, because they carry something so valuable that entire empires would kill to possess it. And yet that's not the most shocking part. Hidden within those dusty crates is a secret that once reshaped the world. A secret so extraordinary that rulers tried to guard it with their lives and spies risked everything to steal it. What was so important, so coveted, that it could ignite wars and forge alliances? The answer lies in a single shimmering thread, a thread of silk. But silk was only the beginning. As merchants crept across deserts, mountains, and battle-scarred borders, they created pathways that connected people who had never even heard of one another. These paths carried more than goods. They carried ideas, stories, and revolutions. Yet no one on those ancient routes understood just how dangerous their journey truly was. Because behind every marketplace stood a shadow of political intrigue. Behind every bargain lay whispers of betrayal. And behind every dusty road hid a mystery that historians are still trying to unravel. How did these distant lands form a network so vast and fragile that one storm, one war, or one ruler's decision could change the fate of continents? Tonight we travel into that mystery. We follow the footsteps of travelers who braved the impossible, not knowing if they would ever return. We uncover the hidden battles behind trade, and we explore how this ancient lifeline stretching thousands of miles became the beating heart of civilization. This is the story of the Silk Road, and the truth waiting at the end of this journey will change how you see history forever. Centuries before the world even imagined global trade, a vast landscape stretched between China and the distant Mediterranean. It was a world carved by deserts, mountains, and empires that rarely trusted one another. And yet, across this unforgiving terrain, a fragile thread of connection began to form. No one expected it to survive, but it did. Our story begins in ancient China during the Han Dynasty. The empire was expanding, hungry for new alliances and wary of powerful nomadic confederations lurking beyond its borders. To the north roamed the Xiongnu, fierce warriors whose sudden raids kept emperors awake at night. Every decision the Han leaders made carried the weight of survival, and one bold decision changed everything. In 138 BCE, the emperor sent a young diplomat named Jiang Qian on a mission few believed he would survive. His goal was simple in words, yet deadly in practice. Find allies in the West who could help China push back the Xiongnu. His journey dragged him across barren plains, scorching deserts, and lands where every stranger might be an enemy. But what he discovered instead was something far more valuable than military support. Jiang Qian returned years later, battered and scarred, with stories of powerful kingdoms far to the west, places filled with horses stronger than anything China had ever seen, and cities rich with exotic goods. His account sparked a fire inside the Han court. If these distant lands existed, then China could reach them and trade with them. But no one realized the consequences this decision would unleash. As merchants began their westward journeys, they found themselves entering a world carved by towering peaks like the Pamir Mountains. These mountains were so massive that travelers said they touched the very sky. Crossing them meant gambling with avalanches, bandits, and sheer exhaustion. Yet caravans continued to climb, driven by the promise of wealth that shimmered just beyond the horizon. Farther west lay the scorching Taklamakan Desert, a place so deadly that locals whispered, "You go in, but you don't come out." Its dunes shifted like ocean waves. Its silence felt alive, as if it listened to every footstep. Travelers tied bells to their camels to avoid losing each other in sudden sandstorms. Even then, many vanished without a trace, swallowed by the endless Yellow Sea. But the dangers weren't only natural. The Silk Road snaked through lands controlled by warlords, kings, and ambitious empires. Parthian, controlling the heart of modern-day Iran, became a key gatekeeper between East and West. To the south rose the powerful Kushan Empire, managing trade routes through Afghanistan and northern India. And farther still, the Romans watched these exotic goods arrive in their markets with fascination and suspicion. Imagine Roman women draped in shimmering silk, unaware that thousands risked their lives to bring that fabric to them. Imagine Chinese artisans weaving cloth that would someday grace the streets of Alexandria or Rome. Neither side knew the other existed in any real sense, yet their desires and ambitions pulled them slowly, inevitably into an unspoken relationship. Cities along the route grew into bustling hubs of culture and power. Samarkand in Central Asia glittered like a jewel, welcoming caravans with its vibrant bazaars. Kashgar, sitting at the crossroads of several routes, became a melting pot of languages, religions, and secret dealings. Every street corner echoed with stories and rumors. Every trade negotiation held hidden stakes. But beneath all the prosperity pulsed a quiet tension. Who controlled the routes? Who taxed the caravans? Who shaped the flow of ideas and wealth through this vast corridor? One shift in power could bring the entire network crashing down. And that tension is where our story begins to rise. Because conflict was never far from the Silk Road, and what came next would test every empire involved in this fragile dance of commerce and survival. Just beyond the peaceful marketplaces and golden sands, danger was waiting, and it would strike when no one expected it. The deeper caravans pushed into the Silk Road, the more the journey transformed from an opportunity into a battlefield. Traders had expected long days, rough terrain, and hard bargains. But they did not expect the simmering conflict that rippled through every empire flanking the route. And soon, the Silk Road became more than a road. It became a prize worth fighting for. The Parthian Empire was the first to tighten its grip. Sitting between China and Rome, they controlled the fertile heartlands of Persia and the crucial crossroads of westbound trade. Their rulers knew the power of holding the middle. They taxed caravans, regulated what passed through their lands, and made sure they alone determined the price of silk and spices. But that wasn't the shocking part. Rome despised the Parthians not only for blocking their path to the east, but for something far more personal: humiliation. In 53 BCE, the Roman general Crassus marched east expecting glory. Instead, his army was crushed at Carrhae by Parthian cavalry wielding terrifying composite bows and deadly horse archers. News of the defeat sent tremors through Rome, and the Parthians knew they had won more than a battle. They had seized control of the most valuable trade artery on earth. As Rome and Parthia glared at each other across desert frontiers, the Silk Road's merchants walked a knife's edge between two angry giants. Caravans carried not just silk and spices, but also rumors. Roman diplomats whispered about bypassing Parthia entirely by reaching China through India. Parthian spies listened, watching every movement, fearing a new alliance that might cut them out of the trade. Suspicion grew with every passing month. Meanwhile, far to the east, China was dealing with its own turmoil. Rebel factions rose and fell. Nomadic confederations attacked Chinese outposts with sudden fury. The Han dynasty poured soldiers into frontier forts to guard the trade routes. Every fort was a lifeline. Every patrol was a gamble. And still, the desert swallowed entire regiments without a trace. But that wasn't the worst part. Even when empires stabilized, the routes themselves remained deadly. The Taklamakan Desert continued to demand its grim toll. Sandstorms could erase the tracks of an entire caravan in minutes. Travelers found themselves surrounded by a sea of shifting gold with no horizon, no landmarks, and no way home. Some were driven to madness by the heat. Others were ambushed by bandits who appeared from the dunes like mirages with blades. The mountain passes offered no mercy either. The Pamir and Tian Shan ranges cut through the sky with razor peaks and icy winds. Avalanches buried caravans without warning. Frozen bodies, perfectly preserved, still lie in those mountains, silent witnesses to the price of progress. Merchants traveled with shaking hands, praying the weather would spare them. Yet they kept going, driven by the promise of wealth. In the bustling hub of Samarkand, the rising tension could be felt in the air. Traders from China arrived with fine silk, jade, and lacquerware. Caravans from the Roman world brought glass, gold, and the deep blue pigment known as lapis lazuli. But beneath the colorful goods, whispers spread like wildfire. Someone was stealing secrets. Someone was manipulating prices. Someone was trying to shift the balance of power. Religions also began to travel west and east like invisible passengers. Buddhist monks carried scriptures tucked inside their robes. Nestorian Christians followed the routes toward China. Zoroastrian and Hindu ideas mingled with new philosophies in crowded marketplaces. Every city became a cultural crossroads, but culture often changed faster than politics could keep up. Suspicion grew as ideas flowed more freely than empires liked. At the same time, a new threat emerged, one no empire could control. Raiders, tribes, and independent warlords began carving out their own kingdoms along the trade routes. They struck when caravans were weakest, sometimes working for empires and sometimes against them. These unpredictable groups turned stretches of the Silk Road into zones of chaos. Merchants never knew whether a distant dust cloud meant salvation or death. Rome, frustrated by Parthian power, launched new campaigns east. China, desperate to secure safe passage, expanded its network of forts and diplomatic ties. The Kushans, rising in Central Asia, created alliances that threatened to redraw the map. Every empire wanted control. Every empire wanted profit. And every empire feared what would happen if they lost it. The Silk Road had become a tense lifeline connecting worlds that struggled to understand each other. One misstep, one war, one assassination, one betrayal could collapse the entire system. And as the first major conflicts erupted between East and West, a new question surfaced, whispered in markets and royal courts alike. If trade could unite the world, could conflict just as easily tear it apart? The Silk Road seemed unstoppable, a living artery pulsing across continents, but no one realized how fragile it truly was. Beneath the surface of bustling markets and diplomatic handshakes, hidden tensions were gathering strength. Something was about to shift, something no empire saw coming. And when it struck, it would change the Silk Road forever. The first signs came quietly. Caravans reported strange disappearances along the western routes. Entire groups vanished without a trace, leaving no footprints, no dropped goods, nothing. Rumors spread of a new force rising in Central Asia, a mysterious confederation of tribes moving swiftly through the steppe. Their presence was only whispered at first, but their shadow grew larger each season. In China, officials examined the reports with growing unease. The Han dynasty was weakening, corruption ate at its core. Rebellions flared like sparks along the frontier, and every spark threatened to become a wildfire. If the empire faltered, bandits and nomads would cut the Silk Road in half. Merchants felt the shift in the air long before scholars recorded it. But the real turning point came from something no one expected, an idea. As Buddhism spread along the Silk Road, it ignited a quiet revolution. Temples rose in distant lands. Monks carried teachings through snow-covered passes and scorching deserts. These ideas offered peace and reflection, yet they stirred political anxiety in certain courts. Some rulers feared foreign influence. Others fought to control monasteries and their growing wealth. And that wasn't the most shocking part. Among the caravans, strange items began appearing. Goods from lands even farther than Rome. Glassware that defied local techniques. Coins bearing unfamiliar rulers' faces. These mysterious objects hinted at new routes forming, sea routes, which threatened to bypass entire kingdoms. The overland Silk Road was no longer alone, and that realization sent a chill through those who depended on its power. Meanwhile, another twist emerged deep in the heart of Central Asia. Archaeologists today still argue over it, but the ancient writings describe something eerily precise, a lost city that appeared to control a hidden network of caravan paths. Some called it a myth. Others swore they had visited its golden gates. Was it a real place or a political ghost story designed to scare rivals? No one knows for certain, but merchants believed it. They whispered that this city held secrets of navigation, weather, and trade, secrets that could tilt the balance of the entire world. And if one ruler seized it, the Silk Road might fall under a single iron grip. Then came the moment that shattered everything. A sudden shift in the climate, a series of brutal winters and devastating droughts, struck several key regions along the route. Crops failed. Cities struggled to feed themselves. Nomadic tribes grew desperate and launched raids with newfound ferocity. Forts that once guarded the Silk Road now fought simply to survive. The delicate system began to crack. In the west, Rome faced its own nightmare. Plagues spread through cities, borders crumbled. Rival generals fought for the throne. The empire was too distracted to protect its eastern interests, and the Silk Road felt the absence immediately. Prices soared, goods became scarce, entire regions slipped into chaos. But one mystery overshadowed them all. Somewhere around this time, perhaps during a storm on the eastern steppes or a battle long lost to memory, a new group emerged. They were fast, ruthless, and incredibly organized. They understood horses better than any other people alive, and they began taking control of vast stretches of the trade routes with terrifying speed. No one knew who they were at first. No one understood their strategy. But their rise set the stage for one of the greatest transformations in Silk Road history. The world was shifting. The empires were trembling. And a new age of power was on the horizon, waiting to strike with unstoppable force. But before that moment arrives, one final secret must be uncovered. A truth hidden in the dust of forgotten cities and the ruins of fallen kingdoms. A truth that reveals why the Silk Road survived so long, and why it ultimately could not endure forever. As the world staggered through conflict, climate shifts, and political turmoil, the Silk Road did not collapse all at once. Instead, it transformed, reshaping itself with every empire that rose and fell along its path. And the more we look at its history, the clearer it becomes that the Silk Road was never just a road. It was a mirror reflecting the ambitions and fears of the civilizations it connected. When the mysterious steppe confederations tightened their control, the empires of Asia and Europe were forced to adapt. Some rulers forged alliances with nomadic tribes, hoping to secure safe passage. Others turned to diplomacy, offering gold or marriage ties to keep the routes open. A few tried brute force, but the vastness of the steppe made total domination impossible. The Silk Road survived not because anyone controlled it, but because no one ever truly could. Then came the Mongols, sweeping across the world with unmatched speed. What seemed like a terrifying apocalypse at first created a strange and unexpected effect. Under Mongol rule, the Silk Road entered a period of unprecedented stability. Caravans traveled from China to the Mediterranean with fewer obstacles than ever before. The Pax Mongolica, as historians call it, turned the route into a superhighway of exchange. Goods flowed faster. Ideas spread further. Even diseases like the devastating Black Death traveled along these same arteries, reminding us that connection brings both wonder and danger. But even the Mongol Empire could not last forever. As it fractured, local rulers emerged, each claiming authority over pieces of the old route. Some welcomed traders. Others suffocated them with heavy taxes or corrupt officials. Slowly, almost silently, the balance shifted again. A new competitor appeared: the sea. While caravans continued to cross deserts and mountains, sailors charted faster, cheaper ocean routes linking China, India, Arabia, and eventually Europe. Spices, silk, and precious goods now glided across waves rather than trudging through sand. Sea trade didn't replace the Silk Road instantly, but each passing decade tipped the scale further. Eventually, the old overland routes faded into the background, overshadowed by the new maritime world. Yet the legacy of the Silk Road was far from over. Think of the ideas it carried. Buddhism transforming East Asia, Persian sciences influencing China, Roman glass inspiring artisans in distant lands. Even simple inventions, paper, gunpowder, and the compass followed these dusty paths and ignited revolutions across continents. Without the Silk Road, the world as we know it would be unrecognizable. This wasn't just a trade network. It was a cultural engine. It nurtured cities like Kashgar, Samarkand, and Merv into centers of learning and art. It created unexpected alliances between empires that had never shared a border. It spread languages, foods, music, and technologies in ways no ruler ever planned. And perhaps most importantly, it showed humanity something revolutionary, that distant cultures could learn from one another, even without speaking the same language. But the Silk Road also left behind stark warnings. It taught us that global connection is fragile, that trade can build peace, but conflict can tear it apart overnight. It taught us that ideas can unite, but they can also disrupt. And it showed how climate, disease, and ambition can shape the fate of entire civilizations. The Silk Road's story is not one of rise and fall. It is one of transformation, a continuous cycle of connections shaped by the hands of countless travelers who dared to walk its perilous roads. And now, one final question lingers in the air, echoing across those ancient ruins and forgotten oases. If the Silk Road once changed the world so profoundly, could its modern revival change our future just as dramatically? If you stand today on the ruins of an old Silk Road outpost, the silence feels almost unreal. The wind moves through broken walls where merchants once bargained, and the fading sunlight paints long shadows across forgotten stones. It's hard to imagine that this quiet place was once part of the most vibrant network on Earth, a network that shaped the fate of empires. But if you listen closely, you can almost hear echoes of distant caravans passing by. The Silk Road reminds us of something powerful. Connection is fragile, but it is also unstoppable. Cultures met here, sometimes in peace, sometimes in conflict, yet every meeting left a trace, a new idea, a new invention, a new belief. And each of those threads wove the world a little closer together. No traveler knew they were changing history, but they were. It makes you wonder, what connections today will define our future? Which new routes, digital or physical, will reshape how nations understand one another? And what stories will people tell centuries from now about the paths we are creating right now? Because the Silk Road wasn't just a stretch of land. It was a lesson written across continents. The world grows stronger when its people are willing to cross boundaries, share knowledge, and face the unknown together. Even when storms rise, even when empires fall, even when the journey feels impossible. So as we close this journey, let the memory of those ancient travelers linger. Imagine their footsteps, steady and determined, carving the first lines of a global map we still walk today. Their courage is the reason our world is connected. Their stories are the reason we can learn, trade, and dream beyond the horizon. And who knows? Maybe the next great bridge between East and West is already forming, just waiting for someone bold enough to follow it. If you enjoyed this journey through history, don't forget to subscribe to History Hub for more cinematic stories.